Something very interesting is already happening behind the scenes in Baltimore, and honestly, most people around the league still have no idea how dangerous this team could become in 2026. Because while everyone is distracted by the big headlines from other franchises, inside the Ravens organization there are young players suddenly exploding at OTAs. Coaches completely changing the energy of the defense, and rookies already making veteran players turn their heads during practice. And one specific player reportedly had such an impressive day that even Mark Andrews walked over personally to celebrate him after a huge play. That's the kind of atmosphere building right now in Baltimore, and if these early signs continue, Ravens fans may be looking at a team that's preparing to make serious noise this season. But before we dive into everything happening at OTAs, make sure you smash that like button if you truly believe the Ravens are coming back stronger in 2026. And I also want to hear from the most optimistic fans in the Ravens flock right now, so go down into the comments and write, "This is our year, Ravens Nation is ready." Now let's get right into the biggest storyline from practice, because this was something Ravens fans have been debating nonstop ever since the offseason began. The center position. After Baltimore decided not to draft a center and also didn't bring in a true starting caliber center during free agency following the departure of Tyler Linderbaum, many people immediately started wondering if Emory Jones Jr. would eventually be moved inside. But now we finally have clarity on that situation. Offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford made it clear that Emory Jones Jr. is not expected to play center for this football team. Instead, Baltimore sees him as a valuable and versatile offensive lineman who can contribute at tackle and guard, which honestly tells us a lot about how the Ravens view his long-term future. And honestly, this makes a lot of sense when you really think about the direction of this roster. The Ravens drafted Van Yuan, and that alone already hinted that the coaching staff likely wanted Emory Jones Jr. to become more of a chess piece along the offensive line instead of locking him into one position. Maybe he develops into a future replacement for Ronnie Stanley as the years go on. Maybe he eventually slides into another starting role if injuries or contracts force changes later down the road. But the important thing here is that Baltimore clearly values flexibility on the offensive line, and they believe Emory Jones Jr. can give them exactly that. But the thing that may honestly be the most encouraging development from day one of OTAs came from the defensive side of the football. According to the reports coming out of practice, this Ravens defense is already significantly more vocal and communicative than it was last season. And Ravens fans know exactly why that matters. One of the biggest frustrations surrounding the defense under Zach Orr was the hesitation, the confusion, and the lack of consistency when it came to alignment and communication. That's exactly why the addition of Jesse Minter feels so important right now. The reports from practice described the defense as loud, aggressive, organized, and constantly communicating before the snap. Roquan Smith was reportedly barking out assignments in the middle of the defense while the secondary quickly followed suit. Players were getting lined up faster, reacting quicker, and playing with far less hesitation. And even though this is only the beginning of OTAs, that type of structure this early in the offseason is exactly what Ravens fans wanted to hear after the struggles from last season. But now let's talk about one of the names that absolutely exploded during practice, because this was something almost nobody expected this quickly. Rookie tight end Josh Quavies apparently had one of the best practices on the entire field. And remember, when Baltimore drafted both Matthew Hibner and Josh Quavies, most fans assumed Hibner would immediately become the bigger receiving threat while Quavies would mainly develop as a blocker. Well, day one may have changed that conversation entirely. According to reports from practice, Josh Quavies was making catches all over the field. He reportedly made a diving catch over the middle that earned praise from Mark Andrews himself. Then he followed it up with several more impressive grabs, including a seam catch with a defender closing in and even a one-handed catch in the flats. That's not normal rookie tight end production during the first OTA session. That's the type of performance that immediately grabs the coaching staff's attention. And this matters because the Ravens desperately need somebody to emerge as a dynamic receiving threat at tight end. Isaiah Likely is gone. Charlie Kolar is gone. Durham Smythe was added, but fans still wanted another explosive option in the passing game. Mark Andrews remains a respected veteran presence, but there's been growing concern about whether he can still consistently create after the catch at the level he once did. So now suddenly, Josh Quavies is entering the conversation much earlier than people expected. Another rookie creating buzz was wide receiver Jacoby Lane, and honestly, this one should excite Ravens fans in a massive way. Reports say Lane made multiple impressive catches during practice, including an extended sideline reception and another difficult grab across the middle. What makes Jacoby Lane so fascinating is his ceiling. His combination of size, athleticism, and raw physical ability gives him one of the highest upside profiles from this rookie class. The Ravens are still searching for consistency at wide receiver beyond Rashad Bateman, and while Lane may still need refinement, the early signs are extremely encouraging. If Baltimore could properly develop him, this could become one of the biggest steals from the draft class. And finally, Ravens fans should be thrilled hearing what's already happening with Malachi Starks. Reports indicate he was constantly around the football during practice and looked extremely comfortable in coverage. Coaches reportedly praised both Starks and TJ Tampa for tight coverage on underneath routes, and this is exactly why many people believe Jesse Minter's arrival would help unlock Starks' full potential. Last season, despite the inconsistency surrounding the defense overall, Starks still showed flashes of becoming a special player. He logged over 1,000 snaps, recorded 2 interceptions for pass breakups, and showed excellent run support throughout the season. Now imagine what he could become inside a more organized and disciplined defensive structure. That possibility alone should have Ravens fans paying very close attention throughout these OTAs. The Ravens also have several other names quietly generating attention behind the scenes, and one player that continues to stand out in conversations around the building is Trey Hendrickson. After all the drama surrounding Baltimore's pursuit of pass rush help earlier in the offseason, the expectations around Hendrickson are enormous. The Ravens know exactly why they brought him in. This defense needed more pressure, more disruption, and more consistency getting after opposing quarterbacks. Last season there were simply too many moments where Baltimore's pass rush disappeared at critical times, and that cannot happen again if this team wants to seriously compete for a Super Bowl. That's why Hendrickson's arrival feels so important. Baltimore is expecting him to immediately elevate the front seven and help create chaos off the edge. And honestly, when you combine that with the improved communication already being reported under Jesse Minter, this defense suddenly feels like it could become far more aggressive than what we watched last season. The Ravens are trying to rebuild that identity of being fast, physical, disciplined, and relentless on every single snap. But another name Ravens fans absolutely need to pay attention to is Adam Randall. This may quietly become one of the most fascinating developmental stories on the entire roster. Reports out of OTAs describe the rookie as an absolute physical specimen, and when people inside practice are talking about a 6'3", 232-pound player moving the way Randall does, everybody starts paying attention immediately. Remember, Adam Randall originally played wide receiver before transitioning into a running back role, and that combination of size plus receiving ability is exactly why some people inside the Ravens community are already getting excited about his long-term upside. There was even discussion during practice about how difficult he could become for opposing defenses to handle catching passes out of the backfield. Just imagine trying to tackle a player with that frame in open space. That is exactly the kind of mismatch Baltimore loves creating offensively. And no, nobody is saying he's already Derrick Henry. But when people even begin mentioning Derrick Henry 2.0 in conversations around a young player, it shows just how intriguing his physical tools really are. Baltimore clearly sees potential there, and OTAs are giving him his first real chance to prove he belongs in this offense. Now we also need to spend time talking about Van Yuan because the Ravens are placing huge expectations on the rookie offensive lineman after what happened to the interior offensive line last season. Quite frankly, the guard play in 2025 became one of the biggest weaknesses on the entire roster. There were too many breakdowns, too much inconsistency, and too many drives ruined because protection collapsed at critical moments. Baltimore knew change